Welcome to this simplistic and very practical action steps based presentation so you can apply real change in your own life for true freedom mentally and physically in every aspect regarding life. That is what the whole focus of this presentation is, and it's called Abolition and Integration. It's bringing together many of the concepts that I talk about throughout a lot of my works and hitting the key points. So we're going to be talking about abolition and integration and understanding what each one of those means, because I call myself an abolitionist. Abolitionist typically in history is regarded as somebody who wants to end slavery. I would hope that the individual listening to this right now, that is yourself, wants to end slavery. But we might be enslaved ourselves in ways we don't understand, and we might get stuck in places where we feel like we're enslaved. Well, no longer, because there's ways we can experiment and different action steps that we can partake in our own life to perhaps create more freedom, because we're thinking outside the box, we're trying new things, and we're adding in new things. That's where integration comes in. Let's get started. Why abolition and integration? Well, we must know what to do and what not to do in our lives. We must know what we should add in and what we should get rid of. We live our lives making choices every day. So do we know our choices? Notice the word know is very much abbreviated here because you need to know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, of course you're going to get results you probably don't want, or results that, well, you don't really know what you're getting. And most people, they want to be healthy. They want to be happy. They don't want a violent world. They don't want a world full of war or chaos. Most people are generally sane in the sense of that is what they want. The problem is they don't know how to actually get it. The problem is they attach themselves to ideas and denial and fear that says I can't get it. But it's absolutely possible, and it all simply requires knowledge, because our minds create this universe and everything that is around us. So if we set our minds on the right track with the right knowledge, we can really set us up for success. So this is the key of this presentation. Do we know what we're doing? It is our choice if we want to make conscious choices or unconscious choices. Now, there is room for the unconscious, because you can't have the conscious without the unconscious, in the sense that you need to be able to reflect and see the parts that you don't see about yourself. You need to look into the unconscious and use the unconscious for your conscious advantage. It's using the yin for the yang, essentially. It's not that we just throw it away, especially since our conscious choices, our real or right actions, the choices we say are great actions, we might want to do them consistently, where it becomes habit, where we start to do them unconsciously. It's not necessarily a bad thing if they're good choices. So unconscious is not necessarily, by definition, a bad thing. But when I say we want to make conscious choices, it means that even those unconscious choices, those choices we're just doing by habit, the Taoists call wu wei, we are doing so because we have knowledge that we know it is right to do for ourselves. We're doing essentially everything in our life to the best of our ability. Okay, so the only good is knowledge, Socrates says. The only evil is ignorance. This is what he's telling us, that it's important we know what we're doing in our life, and that is what makes it good. Whereas if we don't know what we're doing in our life, well, we're ignoring the fact of truth, of the consequences, of the fact of reality that's going to kick us back in the butt and whip us into shape, because we're not listening to our environment. We're not listening. We can't listen in order to speak. We need to be able to listen in order to learn. So having that moment of yin, or the unconscious for the conscious, is very, very important. Seeing our ignorance is the very first step toward knowledge, recognizing what we don't know. And so we all are ignorant in some ways, and then recognizing that ignorance allows us to move toward knowledge, allows us to move toward good, which we're ever striving for. There isn't this perfect label of this is good, that's it. No, we're always striving to make better choices and do better every single day of our lives. This is integrating good and abolishing evil, essentially. So if we recognize ignorance as evil, what do we do with ignorance? If we recognize knowledge as good, what do we do with knowledge? We would abolish ignorance and integrate knowledge. Okay? Now, maybe there's knowledge that is actually keeping you ignorant. What would you say to that? Well, then it's ignorance, right? It's not knowledge. And maybe there's ignorance that is actually quite knowledgeable, quite reasonable. in the sense of somebody might not be partaking in society. Somebody will call them ignorant because they're not partaking in society. But they know what they're doing. And if they know what they're doing, then perhaps they're not so ignorant, right? And so the question then becomes, what are we ignoring? What do we know? We have to get very specific. So if we really look at abolitionism is a moral change. Because again, we're trying to create better things in our life, so we want to know what to get rid of. Abolitionism, it's the principle of abolishing something. That's from 1790 in a purely anti-slavery sense. The 19th century individuals against slavery in America coined the term abolitionist to represent their moral cause for freedom. And this is quite significant because they could have called themselves a gradualist, but they weren't. They were immediatists. They were abolitionists because they saw slavery was wrong. So they weren't going to just make slavery a better condition. They said, it's wrong, therefore we should abolish it. We should get rid of it. Why have it in our lives at all? If it's wrong, it's wrong. And so they stood on a principle. And that principle was their movement and became their title, but they're simply themselves. It became abolitionism. So why would we want to get rid of something in our life? Why would we want abolitionism? Well, in the case of the 1800s, it became apparent because, well, we recognize these other human beings are just like us. Why should we enslave them? Why should we have slavery at all? If it's wrong, we recognize that it's wrong. We can try to create justifications, but it's wrong. Let's get rid of it. People try to find all sorts of justifications for their evil doing, even in their personal life. Well, it's just one drink. Oh, it's just this drug. Well, I kind of need this drug. I need this thing in my life, even though I know it's not really that great. I need it. Right? They create all these mental justifications, and then people call them out and say, well, why are you doing this? This contradicts your own belief system. Well, because I had no choice at the time, and this and that. They try to jump for every single justification they can look for. But standing on principle, there is no justification. There's only action. Action that is right or action that is wrong. And you understand that which is wrong, and that allows us to know what action is right. And so we want to get rid of something in our life to create a better life, because we recognize some things might be holding us down, like a weight on our shoulders, a common expression. We don't want it on us because it doesn't need to be on us. And we see that intent within the universe, essentially, the same way the abolitionists look at the universe and said, these people are meant to be free. Now, we could argue and say that the world would be better off if these people were free, but no, these people are meant to be free because that condition was imposed upon them. So how many conditions in your life was imposed upon you? It isn't naturally there, that was imposed upon you, since perhaps a very young age. It's a weight on your shoulder that you can absolutely get off your shoulder because it's not there naturally with you. It's something you may think is naturally with you because you were having this weight on your shoulder so long in your life, but it doesn't need to be on your shoulder because you're much more than that. You're a human being who doesn't need to have that weight on your shoulder. And so the conscious choice to abolish something is not ignorance, but abnegation. Because you may say it's ignorance of, well, I'm ignoring this. So to get more specific, like I said before, now we can understand abnegation versus ignorance. Abnegation says, hey, I don't want this thing in my life, okay? Now, it's not ignorance if you know why, because you're making a conscious choice to abolish something, to get rid of it out of your life. Now, the mass conscious choice to abolish something is not abnegation, but abolitionism, because now you're adding an ism to it, you're creating a movement, and this is an effort which requires integrating in education, because not just now for you, it's not just educating yourself, it's educating other people, because it's now a mass conscious choice. You want the world to be conscious, you don't just want yourself to be conscious. Well, then you don't partake in certain acts, but then you encourage others not to partake in certain acts. And perhaps it's more of what we should not do rather than what we should do. A lot of people say, do this, do this, do this, do this. Perhaps doing less. Lao Tzu tells us this, a famous philosopher back 2,000 plus years. He says to unlearn is actually learning, right? And even Socrates tells us that the more he knows, the less he knows, really. Because you realize all the programming, all the illusions, and all the things that you put on yourself, all these weights on your shoulders that don't need to be there. their attachments, their desires, their expectations, their egos, their identities, and they keep you away from your honest, original self, which the Taoists call the uncarved block. And so, are we abolishing evil? And how do we get rid of evil? These are two questions I'm going to keep with you in your own mind, hopefully, throughout the rest of this presentation. And so, we can start off with understanding statism, because this is core concept for a lot of the work that I talk about, and even in the cause for abolitionism. You know, again, going back, how are we abolishing evil? How do we get rid of evil? Are we doing it right now? I mean, if we were to look at evil on the mass scale of things, all the people in the world, what are they partaking in unconsciously? What are they born into and don't even think about? What is this burden on their shoulders that is constantly affecting them all the time within their life? Well, I'll give you a hint. It has to do with politics. The very nature of politics is to impose your will on other human beings, to say you have the whole world figured out and that you have a structure for that world and that you want everybody to conform to that structure. And so that conformist mindset is statism. That order-following mindset is statism. Statism is the belief that there is such a thing as human vested authority vested in certain human beings, magically giving them the right to rule over other people. This authority means that certain people who we call government have the moral right to issue commands to those whom they rule, those under their jurisdiction, all these terms that they just make up, and that their subjects or slaves have a moral obligation to obey the arbitrary dictates or laws set by their masters. These laws are merely just opinions on pieces of paper. And so most simply put, a statist is someone who believes in the legitimacy of slavery, since they're putting other human beings above other human beings. They're giving them special rights to commit actions which everybody else doesn't have the right to do themselves. And they're saying this person, given this authority, is allowed to do it because they're an authority figure. And that we must obey them because they're an authority figure. We must do everything they say. And if we say, no, we should not do everything they say, then we're using our conscience. So then you would recognize our conscience is above this fake man-made authority. You're saying our conscience would be our natural authority within ourselves, then we don't really need any other external authority. We don't need these man-made governments and politicians. We don't need those man-made laws telling us how to live our lives because we're following some sort of natural law or natural rules within the universe that most people actually understand, such as murder is wrong, theft is wrong. Most people know this. They only give that an exception in this belief system because they say certain people are authority figures, so they have the right to tax the public, for instance. They have the right to coerce them for whatever they think is for the greater good, common good, and they make this big, arbitrary justification. But you're guaranteeing a wrong for a possible good. It inherently is logically fallacious. And so if you don't think that's the case, answer these 5 questions on the screen. And if you're watching this, and if you need to, if you're watching it live, and it's kind of hard to, but if you're watching the recorded video, I want you to pause and ask yourself these questions because you're never going to understand what I'm saying until you ask yourself these questions and think about it with your own mind, which you were given by nature, by God, by natural authority. That's the last thing man-made authority wants you to do, is use what you were given. Because that obligation, that burden that they put on your shoulders, they want you to keep it there and think it's part of who you are until it basically drags you out into death later in your life. Whereas you can be free and away from that once you recognize your own power, that you can take off that weight off your shoulders. It doesn't need to be there. You can be free. You're meant to be free. Okay, ask yourself these questions. They don't want you asking these questions. I say they, guess what? It's you and I. It's most people who don't want to ask these questions because most people don't want to confront themselves. So it's not even that other people are really telling you not to. It's ourselves. We want to keep ourselves ignorant. We want to keep ourselves making unconscious choices because we think it's too hard to make conscious choices. Well, guess what? That's how you make the most evolutionary progress in history. The abolitionists had to go against thousands of years of programming. Thousands of years to end chattel slavery. Do you think that was an easy endeavor? People say, well, you can't get rid of these systems that be. They're there for thousands of years. Well, what is evolution, my friend? What is moral progression? What did Henry David Thoreau say? He said that government is best that governs not at all. And he says that's a goal that can be attained with enough moral education. The same exact understanding of the abolitionist, including himself, the same exact understanding as the Taoist many thousands of years ago, including Mencius, who says, hey, moral education, we can't make someone good, they have to learn for themselves, right? And what we can do in the meanwhile is learn to control ourselves. We can't change people from being people. People will always be people. We learn to live with them. If we try to change them, it's counterintuitive. We make problems worse. So what is integration? Integration is also moral change. It is, from the 1610s, the act of bringing together the parts of a whole. From French integration and directly from late Latin integrationem, nominative integratio, renewal or restoration, noun of action from past participle stem of Latin integrare, meaning to make whole, also renew, begin again. So we're asking, how do we return to our uncarved block, our simplistic childlike state where we're free and we don't have all these obligations and attachments on our shoulders? Perhaps it starts with integration. Instead of a to-do list of what to do, what not to do, how about integrating? Just adding in naturally to crowd out the bad naturally. Because as we add in the good, the bad will just cease to exist. It really is that simple. If you said, hey, I don't need the current food system by Walmart, by any of these big supermarkets because I grow my own food right now and it tastes better, it's more nutritious, it's easier to get, well, gosh, I don't need that system anymore. How did I get to that conclusion other than by introducing a better solution? In the same way, when it comes to government affairs, if we want a better system, guess what? The market will help individuals do that because the market allows competition. Free markets allow individuals to find out the best products. We're going to be talking about that. Okay, but why would we want to add something into our life? Because in the same way, in the market, there's different products being added. Why would those new products exist? Because there's a new demand, because there's something that needs to be done, because people want change, because people are fed up with what is currently going on. And so the conscious choice to integrate something is not just knowledge, but wisdom. Questions become answers, micro becomes macro. That's essentially what's happening. What we think and what we think commonly and connect the dots, ultimately now we form something new, right? And our knowledge now becomes wisdom. And what we once had, the little leaf now turned into a huge plant and now it's a tree. Oh my gosh. And so now the mass conscious choice, not just one individual, not just one tree, but many trees, which by the way, one individual, two individuals gives way to three individuals gives way to 4 or 5, and it just keeps multiplicating just like anything in nature, just like bacteria, just like plants. The mass conscious choice to integrate something is not wisdom, but integration. Okay, so knowledge, wisdom, integration. Okay, and so we learn here, we're learning. We learn from our ignorance for abnegation, for abolitionism. We understand our knowledge for our wisdom, for our integration. This is an effort which requires abolishing ignorance. You must recognize your ignorance in order to attain knowledge. So it requires abolitionism. Integration and abolitionism is essentially working together here. So are we integrating good? How do we add in the good? Again, keep these questions with you throughout this presentation. Let's start with our first example and see how we can practically add action steps within our own life. Our known options, law. So we're going to first look at law, man-made law versus natural law. Man-made law is based upon belief. It's complied with due to fear and punishment. It differs with location. It changes with time. This is every law man creates for all time. Natural law, well, it's based upon knowledge. We're always learning natural laws. Oh, gravity, thermodynamics, what is it, right? They're always happening. They're universal. They're harmonized with due to understanding and applying them. Trial and error sometimes, right? Oh, I jumped off a cliff. I got hurt. Whoops. It's universal. It's eternal. It's amazing. Our ancestors can pass down this knowledge, and it cannot be changed, right? It doesn't need to be written on a piece of paper. It doesn't need to be granted upon by some authority. It doesn't need some church to represent it. Everybody can understand it because they're all within nature. Natural laws are all present for each and every single individual. Up to that individual if they want to learn, become conscious of that. If they want to remain in ignorance, they might be under man-made law because someone's taking advantage of them. Someone's saying, I can impose my will on you. You're just going to do anything I say. You're a slave. Okay? And just like Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson says, again, the only obligation I have is to do what I think is right all the time. That's the only true obligation I have in this life, to do what is right. So which are you obligated to follow? Are you obligated to follow man-made law or natural law? You think you're obligated to follow man-made law, you're lying to yourself. Because again, it's just some opinions, piece of paper. Some people who think that that's legitimate, okay, through statism. But you're actually obligated to follow natural law. You have no choice. It's nature. It's going to kick humans in their butt if they don't learn their lesson. If they don't realize man-made law is the illusion the entire time. That's not reality. So stop thinking that's reality. Stop calling it naturalization, by the way. Naturalized means to make natural. So every time you say someone's naturalized into a country, you're saying it's natural for them to be born into a government? No. It's natural for them to just exist and be a human being, and they can live anywhere they want. Because this whole world belongs for everybody. Stop trying to be a racist in terms of you don't want certain people in your country. This is the true religion everybody follows. Okay, everybody cries of racism and social justice. This is the one true divide between the individual who wants to tell others how to live their own life and the individual who just wants to leave other people alone. I just want to leave people alone. You don't have to agree with me. Just leave people alone. That's it. And that's you not having to agree with me. You having to agree with whoever you want to agree with, but not making me agree with you. And so, why does man-made law exist? Man-made law exists to do exactly that, to force compliance. It exists because some people think they know everything about the world compared to other people. It exists because somebody wants a paycheck along with their knowledge, right? Rather than learning and teaching others, inspiring others to be their own leaders, and people willingly, voluntarily work with them and voluntarily emulate their actions. So man-made law does not exist. It's just opinions. It's just pieces of paper. Why follow it? You have actually no obligation to follow it. How does morality or truth relate to natural law? Well, guess what? Morality and truth are not man-made concepts. Now you say, well, what do you mean? Well, morality, it is a man-made concept to the sense that we put terms and labels on it, but clearly there's rules within the universe. If we don't follow them, we're going to lose our very being. We won't even be able to talk about morality or truth. See, when people talk about a natural law and relate it to morality or truth, the reason why they would do that is because they have no choice but to follow nature. So natural law really is just nature, and that is the only moral standard. Now, there's a lot of standards that we can say, yeah, they're pretty darn man-made, including morality many times, because we say, man, you're just drawing lines in the sand of what you think is right and wrong. But there's one thing that all of us have to comply to, and that's nature. The problem is people try to put words and labels on it. It's the same thing man-made law does. It can't really work like that. But the difference is, let's say you do. Let's say you say, natural law says you cannot do harm to other people. It doesn't really hurt anybody because, well, guess what? It's voluntary. It's not something that man-made law says, well, this is what's wrong, and if you don't agree with what is wrong, we're going to punish you. Natural law is learning, and again, trial and error and practice, and not everybody's going to have the perfect vision of it, and it's going to encourage more discernment and be able to see that definitions can change throughout time. Let us recognize that it's not just limited to harm then in that case, because that will limit our own understanding of nature and our understanding of natural law. But we can start from a premises that we know of. Most people may agree, yeah, it's wrong to harm others. Yeah, it's wrong to do something involuntary to others. So you build upon that premises. And then you see, okay, there are other gaps that need to be filled in here. What is actually then the moral standard? And again, trying to perhaps capsulate it is maybe part of the problem. But we can understand, again, that the conscience is above man-made law, because if you disagree with a law, are you morally obliged to follow the law? Or are you obliged to follow your conscience? I mean, because if you're going to say, well, you have to follow the law, then I guess you're just like one of those soldiers who bring the soldiers to the people to the camps in Nazi Germany. You're just one of the soldiers who bring the people to the gulags in Soviet Russia or China, or the millions of dictatorships all around the world that all had the same exact result happen because of order followers. People ignoring their conscience. They know what they're doing is wrong, but they just completely ignore it. So, okay, let's just ignore our conscience, the fact we have it, the fact that we teach morals, well, that doesn't matter because authority, human authority, man-made law, that matters more. No, it doesn't. That you're propagandized, indoctrinated into through the schooling system. So what should you integrate and what should you abolish? Should you integrate knowledge and truth and morality, or should you integrate just do what you're told? Authority. Oh, because some founding father said so 300 years ago, you never knew and you weren't even there. Oh, because the Constitution says so, that some piece of paper that somebody wrote on some fancy piece of parchment that says they can take your money. Yeah, no, I don't think that's one I want to have in my life. So you can make that decision for yourself. If we're abolishing man-made law, that means stop thinking about the temporary world. And if we're integrating natural law, start thinking about the ever-present world, because its nature has always been here. Man-made law, it's temporary, it's based on whims, it's not universal. So if you want to apply a practical action step, this is the first one. Think about the ever-present rather than the temporary. That includes a lot of material things, by the way. Okay? And if you can think in terms of that long-term progression, you can help humanity in its evolution. So, speaking of evolution, speaking of knowledge and truth and morality, let's talk about it. Learning. You have two options here. You have systemic schools and individualized schools. Okay, systemic schools are based upon indoctrination. It teaches authority as virtue. We're typically talking here about state-run schools, by the way, if you haven't noticed. It offers unhealthy food. It creates stress, and students can learn unwanted subjects. Whereas individualized schools, they're based upon creative interest. They teach virtue as authority. Not authority as virtue, but virtue, morality itself as authority. It offers more homemade food. There's more care, there's more attention on the individuals. There's an interactive and valued environment. People like being there. The kids might want to learn. So which would you want your child to do? Be part of some system that a bunch of people are part of? Oh yeah, they get to be with other people. They can still be with other people. They don't need to have propaganda pushed upon them. Okay? They don't need to be taught that authority matters higher than their own moral view of the world. Okay? They can want to develop their own moral view and understand its importance, but you can't emphasize its importance of thinking for themselves and making their own right actions unless you recognize, hey, I need to take control of myself. I need to be responsible for myself. And guess what? Now they can become an entrepreneur. Now they can create their own projects, be a unique philosopher throughout history. Who knows what they'll do because they'll be thinking outside the box now. They're not stuck in the box with the systemic schools that everyone else is doing because it's conformity, because it creates stress and they're always in fear. Do you think it's a good state for your kid, for your children? I mean, gosh. And you say, well, I did that in my school. Well, then don't replicate it to your children. Just because you did it does not mean your children have to do it. This is how trauma replicates generation after generation. Well, I did this, my parents did this, and so you should do that too. But at the same time, they'll say, enjoy your youth and have fun and don't worry. And oh my gosh, I wish I was young like you. They contradict themselves. Good job, adults. You want to blame the kids for all their faults. What about you raising the kids? Okay? The kids are, yeah, they're at fault, but guess what? They're kids. And so you can't blame them if they make wrong actions. They're learning. Help them learn. Don't try to just push them off into the school system. Oh, they'll learn hopefully eventually, maybe on their own. Yeah, no. How about you help them? That's what a parent is supposed to do. That's why you're their parent. Okay? They're supposed to be kind of like you. Okay? They have your genetics. Kind of want to nurture that. And so what would you want your child to do? Be part of this, brick in the wall Pink Floyd system, or be part of a supportive, nurturing system? I mean, gosh. How would a child learn in nature? A child would be, creative, exploring, not necessarily given a set curriculum. They'd be probably with their parents, as we see a lot of tribes in nature do. And so why do systemic schools exist? They exist because that's what the state primarily uses to push statism, to push their ideology, to push man-made law, to push narratives of history. Does that really even matter? All the things you learn in school, do you even apply to the real world? Okay, it can help you with some critical thinking. You can't do that on your own. Oh, what's the point of the internet? What's the point of books? What's the point, again, of your parents? Of being raised, of spending time together, of having fun. Even Plato said you can learn more in having fun with somebody, in an hour of fun than, several hours of talking with them or doing something else. Because fun and play is what kids want to do. Stop trying to make kids cultured and trying to put them in the man-made world. There's a reason why the term adulterated exists, because adults are being taken away from their natural state. The kids want to explore because they're creative. More than adults because they're less programmed. They're able to see more. They ask questions. They're curious. If you allow them to, you push that down, guess what? They're going to become depressed. You wonder why this generation's having mental issues? Has nothing to do with the governments that be? Absurd. It absolutely does. Has everything to do with the systems that we create. Okay? We need to go back to nature in the sense of recognizing parents should always be there for their own children. Okay? And children, human beings, should always be there for their own selves. Self-ownership, the key for understanding our own power. And we cannot unlock that power if we're always pushing our responsibility and our ownership onto others. And guess what? If you're pushing your own responsibility, your own ownership onto others, you're now a slave. So what should you integrate and what should you abolish? If we're abolishing systemic schools, we will stop teaching authority. We will stop dictating. We will stop degrading human beings. We will empower everybody. If instead we want to integrate individualized schools, we will start teaching morality. We will start learning from the students and respecting them. Adults can learn from the youth. Actually, don't forget that part. Oh, I have so much to teach them. I need to teach them everything I know and make sure that they have exactly what I think. Nope. Counterintuitive. Work with the individual. Just as a doctor should work with the patient. Otherwise, the patient's going to be like, man, this doctor knows nothing about me and they're just throwing drugs in my face. How about the doctor works with the patient and listens to them? Listen to your kid, okay? They're not dumb. They come from your bloodline. Respect that. See the beauty in it. Nurture it where it currently is at, because nature will grow them in their mind and soon they will have the ability to think for themselves. Okay? They want to have that ability to think because nature destines it for them. So nurture that. Allow them to have that. Teach morality. Stop teaching authority as morality. There's a reason why, we, again, choose what to do in our own lives every day. But if we really nurture that, then we can make really wise choices for the future, prevent cancer, prevent all the problems that we see in the world. And so similarly, when we're talking about health, we can talk about diet. The natural diet versus the processed diet. The natural diet would be based upon foods unaltered from their original form. It is most timeless, or what people may call ancestral. It includes whole, raw, fresh, seasonal, local, nutritious, or healthy food. Okay? A processed diet is based upon foods altered from their original form. It is not timeless. They're often man-made, we call them, heavily denatured, exported. We usually even use the word diet, which implies it's already very much processed because we have to say it needs to fit under this box and way of doing things. You don't see animals necessarily saying, well, I'm on a diet. I'm going to lose weight. No, they're so in tune with nature, they don't have to worry about this garbage and this billion-dollar industry that basically feeds on people being dependent, having to be on a diet to be healthy. Diets are literally restrictive by their nature. It's the abolition without the integration. And so it's malnourishment because an individual will just count calories all day or give themselves foods that they don't want to eat. Well, you should actually like what you eat. It shouldn't be a hard process. Yeah, there's some discipline involved, but at the same time, again, if you're working with your body, working with your nature, you're going to find solutions that are better, not worse. Things should work more effective and be healthier, okay, at the same time, right? So safe and effective. If it's effective but not safe, then it's not really that effective, ain't it? If it's safe but not effective, then it needs to work together. Everything needs to work together. An individual can grow a food forest, start eating food from their own food forest. They're not getting just their own nutrition. They're also interacting with the soil, with the microbes. They're interacting with the environment. They're growing it seasonally. There's so many things that work together because it's natural. Now, yes, they're growing the food, so that may not be as natural because there's human input. But how long have we been growing food versus how long have we been processing food? Processing is a new phenomenon that totally changes the form of food, and it makes it more addictive and tricks our taste buds on purpose. And if we know that, then we can create more conscious actions for ourselves in the future. So which would you take part in for your own body? Would you partake in a natural diet or a processed diet? Your body, you want it to be healthy, right? You want it to be functional. Well, what does that even mean? It means that your nature is fulfilled. Your nature is acting optimally. So feed your nature. Well, what feeds the nature? Well, what is natural? And so what variations exist about diets? There's many different types of diets. Can we look between all the lines, be able to distinguish, be able to learn from all of them, be able to also look outside of all of them? What's in your diet? Your diet can simply be your lifestyle. It should be long-term sustainable if it's actually something that's optimal, right? It shouldn't be something you're just on for a month and then you get off and then you gain weight again and then, now you have to go back on it. That's not sustainable. Something that you enjoy, that you don't have to worry about because it's effortless. It's Wu Wei, again, the Taoist concept, because it's effortless intelligence. You know what you're doing, it becomes unconscious, even though it's conscious. And so why do different diets exist? Different diets exist because they teach us that there's problems in the world, there's imbalances, and those imbalances are leading to different ways of eating. And there's also many different types of people. There's many different types of seasons. There's many different types of seasonings. There's so many different types of things we can consume out there, even information. So we have to question, are we stuck in a loop where we constantly need those things, or are we fulfilled? And if we become fulfilled, then we're not so much dependent. We don't even need to really talk about it. If we're constantly talking about it, then you maybe know it's part of a problem. Like many people are now talking about teeth issues. Well, maybe you wouldn't have that issue if we weren't so malnourished or had minerals in our diet, perhaps. You ever think about that? Oh, but we're never going to treat the root cause. We just want to keep doing symptom management. Well, in that case, then we're just going to keep creating more diets because we're never finding out the root cause of the problem, which may be completely outside of the dieting sphere. Well, what does that mean? Do I have to just breathe and eat nothing all day? No, that's another diet, right? Do I have to eat all ancestral? I don't know. Maybe you should try it. Maybe you should try not eating one day. Maybe you should try fasting a little bit. Maybe you should see why other countries don't even have to worry about this mess. Do detoxes help integrate? Well, they take out in the body, but they don't really integrate. So maybe they allow our natural functions to work more, so in that way it's integrating. But realize that detoxes can also be limiting, and the fact that it's the abolition without the integration. So if you're taking something out, realize you need to add something in. Okay? There's people, right, who go through chemotherapy, these cancer treatments. Oh, I lost this, I lost that. Well, I hope you're doing something to replenish that, even though there probably would have been natural treatments that you probably just ignored because you thought they wouldn't work and because you want to do what your doctor tells you to do. No, think for yourself. Do research. You have the internet, right? A lot of that is also censored. Not surprised. Think for yourself and realize that nature is beyond all the man-made standards, all the diets, all the laws. Okay? And if you have that mindset, you will always try to find the best solution for yourself. You will experiment, and you're not going to limit your options to say, well, I have to be vegan. I have to do carnivore. I have to do this. No, you don't. Experiment. Find out what works and what agrees with your own body. You live in this mass world. There's food, abundance, all this stuff. Use it to your advantage. Some people and a lot of people don't have that, especially all throughout history. Maybe that's part of the problem, though, because we have so much of a mess. That's why we don't know what mess we're in. And so if we're abolishing a processed diet, here's a simple action step. Stop consuming high glycemic foods. Stop doing diets. Stop doing the things that you know are going to excite your body too much. Stimulants, for instance, that bring you out of your natural state, that keep you away from your honest self. I even did a documentary about how veganism can be unnatural and immoral. I go into all of it. I have yet for anybody to really challenge this. Okay, high glycemic food. So what does that mean? It's foods that are breads, carbs, that are basically turned into sugar immediately in the body. Now you can consume ancient grains. Okay, that's better, but you still have the anti-nutrients. Oh, okay, so we can sprout them, we can soak them. Well, there goes all the nutrients. And you're cooking them, there goes even more nutrients. Maybe what we can do is start integrating a natural diet. So start consuming quality raw animal products. There's a reason, guys, why they are illegal in many places. Because they're very beneficial for humans. Very beneficial for all beings on Earth. Raw animal products. Okay? Now, it's not to say that you should not cook at all. It's recognizing to start consuming. I'm not saying that's the only thing you consume. I'm not saying that's the answer to everything in your life. I'm saying start experimenting with it, because most people are just going to say, oh, I can't do that. That sounds disgusting. Yeah, you want to be ignorant because you don't want to try it. When there's people who have tried it, and I have tried it, and it's amazing what it can do for you. And it's healed people out of so many different health conditions. Why? Because it's the most nutritious form of food in the entire earth, especially raw liver. Now, you can cook liver, okay? I'm not saying you have to buy raw liver, okay? But make sure it's grass-fed. Make sure it's good quality. Always question everything you're doing. Just something to add in, something you probably never heard of. That's why I had to mention it. And so if we understand even more as to a natural diet, it's working with our own nature, integrative nutrition. And it's the secret to total health, bio-individuality, finding out what works for our individual self. Everybody is different because of all the many different types of characteristics we all have, the many different types of environments, like I said before. So we have to really be able to start listening. Even if you see and what you think you see is the truth, it still isn't the truth. Be able to be flexible and integrative. That's what integrative means. Be able to share your experience. Be able to share in this marketplace of ideas, because there's so much out there. Look at this: conventional medicine, alternative medicine, complementary medicine, functional medicine, integrative medicine. It's all there. Right? But the reason why integrative medicine is particularly useful, that I'm highlighting here, is because it combines conventional and alternative medicines in a coordinated way. It has an emphasis on data-driven solutions that are safe and patient-focused. So we're not imposing our will on others. I simply say, add in raw animal products to see how it is. Currency. So when I talk about a free market and sharing these ideas and people being open to it, that's where we see the free market versus the controlled market, because the controlled market is based upon individuals involuntarily trading with one another. So it's basically third-party interference. Real tolerance is allowing people to pursue their own life. A controlled market creates monopolies, black markets, and it creates fewer choices. Whereas a free market is based upon individuals voluntarily trading with one another, finding out what is the best solution. There's no need for third-party interference. There is supply and demand, and there's natural competition. There's no interference. There's people simply trading with other people. This is what's considered real capitalism, okay? But I don't like to use that term because it's been thrown all over the place throughout history for more controlled ways of controlling people, okay? But communism too can be voluntary. Socialism can be voluntary. Capitalism can be voluntary. But that's if we're looking at morality. We're adding it to the equation instead of just focusing on just economics. So which one would allow everyone to share their own products, a controlled market or a free market? Well, a free market would allow people to share their own stuff, okay? And if it's a really good product, people are going to be, wow, I need to make this, I need to buy it, oh my gosh, and now the world can benefit. Now, why do controlled markets exist? Is it because certain people want to have certain products that other people don't want to have? Is it because there's collectivism present? It must be this way and it can't be any other way? That's the only reason why it would be controlled. Right? You can say, oh, well, in this free market, this guy's taking up all this land, he's taking up all this. Well, people are voluntarily participating in it. If they don't want to, they don't have to. Okay? And there's many ways to say, hey, I don't want this, or I think something should change, but it's all voluntary. Otherwise, if it isn't voluntary, guess what? You got a controlled market, you got a government. Okay, so which is more sustainable, a free market or a controlled market? Controlled markets are just a matter of time to fall apart because, well, just as the Tao teaches us, we understand that the individual who's imposing their will on others, it's going to backfire on them. Because individuals want to be free, they want to have autonomy. And so how does each operate over time? We see free markets lead to further innovation. We see that they lead to individuals creating more products, and they make great corporations, but guess what? Those corporations are always going to have competition. Unless they claim to be the only way, guess what? Now it becomes controlled. But they can only do so using violence, adding a government into the equation, adding a system of legitimate violence or authority. So a free market is without the government interference. A controlled market is with that government interference. So what should you integrate and what should you abolish? Many people say, well, we need to regulate this. We need to regulate that. How are the regulations going so far? How about that? Is the FDA really keeping you safe? Are these three-letter agencies really keeping you safe, dumping stuff into the oceans, not regulating most of the stuff anyways? Okay? I'd rather people are obligated to be more conscious of their choices, rather than just doing what they're told because of some standard, some trusted corporation that they don't even have control over, that steals their money, okay? That's the FDA. That's all these government agencies. They're not in it for your health. They're a business. They want you sick, keeping you not too healthy but not too sick, so you're stuck in the middle dependent on them for their services. Otherwise, they wouldn't exist. So that is what they rely on, okay? And you can say the same thing for a lot of businesses. They exist primarily because of some sort of problem that is there. But guess what? You can't take that out of existence. There's always going to be people saying, man, we got to create a solution to this. But the problem is, and when you have government, they can totally limit those options and eliminate the options that can really help people. Because they'll use violence. They'll add violence to the equation. Every time you add government into the equation, you're adding violence. Leo Tolstoy said this. So if we're going to abolish a controlled market, we stop forcibly controlling others. If we're going to integrate a free market, we're going to start voluntarily trading with others. And you can see I did a video on how money is perhaps not the most important for freedom and happiness, but it's not the focus, to say the least. Although, again, in the free market, there's always going to be some form of money or currency, and seeing that free market still implies that currency can be used for something good. Because, again, like apple for an apple, there's always going to be that sort of trade in human beings. Even if you gave trading cards to kids, they're just going to do it naturally on their own. There still are problems with money, even though it can be seen in a natural light. It can be seen in a light that is basically unavoidable, okay, by human nature. So we can voluntarily share with each other just as we do every day, and we can stop forcibly controlling others through the use of the state and government, and that will allow people to freely go about their own lives, making their own choices for themselves and reaping their own consequences. So what is then leadership? Controlling leadership is based upon expectation for designated authority. It is overruling those of whom must look up to you, and it is dismantling opposition and free choice. Whereas emulative leadership is based upon proving oneself, listening to those of whom look up to you. It's empowering others to be leaders. It is encouraging question and alternative. So there's a big difference here between an emulative leader and a controlling leader. And you know, there's also a difference between the terms we use. We say this person's a master. Well, they can be a karate master or they can be a slave master. They're two completely different types, right? We can say they're a ruler or we can say they're a leader, but a ruler implies they're controlling the nation and telling others what to do. A leader might be someone who's like really inspiring, somebody you want to follow. So this is the very difference between someone who's controlling and someone who is emulative. So which type of leader would you look up to? If you're looking up to them and you want to look up, then it's emulative. But if you have no choice but to look up, then it's controlling. Could anyone become a leader? How? In any case, right? I mean, you know, it takes a good amount of skill to be a leader, somebody who wants to be emulated by other people. It's because they've accomplished something in life, not because they have some title, some authority. No, If it's emulative, it's because they are worth following. They have some sense of value that people see in them, or their ideas more particularly, which is what actually matters. So how special are leaders to be compared to other people? If we say they're super special, that they should be an authority, be crowned, to be given special rights, and the ability to create actions that other people can't, then we're really putting them up on a pedestal. They will become controlling because we literally give them control of our own lives. We're literally passing up our own responsibilities, saying, just here, take my life, right? Whereas if we have some sense of self-empowerment and self-responsibility, we will recognize, okay, they're great to follow, but for myself, I'm not going to worship them and treat them like a religion. Because most people treat government as a religion and they pray for things to change and they look up to them as deities to sort of change their reality, which again isn't reality if it's based on man-made law and man-made opinion. So government has basically twisted the very nature of nature itself. This is the whole point of my book, Government is Unnatural, Anarchy is Natural. And so what are we integrating and what are we abolishing? Are we integrating leaders who we want to follow, or are we integrating leaders who tell us that we have to follow them? If we're abolishing a controlling leader, we stop following orders for authority. And if we're integrating an emulative leader, we start voluntarily following an inspiration. So there is a big difference there. Again, voluntary interaction. You see this common trend among all the action steps we're talking about, creating a voluntary, working, nurturing system for everybody through everything they do. And that's totally possible. But if you create an overarching controlling system for everything that people do, then don't be surprised if everything within that system starts becoming controlling as well, including the diet, including health, including relationships. It's all going to become controlling because of this overarching controlling mechanism, the government, i.e. statism, that is being permitted into life, that everybody just thinks is normal and natural and perfectly moral. And so what about change? You have political action and moral action. Political action is based upon involuntary hierarchies. It's creating new authority figures. It's through elections, majority voting, imposing their will on the minority, no matter what, percentage it is, 99% and the 1%, they get to impose their will on them. It's still immoral because it's still the same action. It's imposition against people who do not want that for their own life. And there's paperwork, there's legalese. This is political action. And even people who say we need paperwork to free ourselves, that's still political action because it's still playing into the system and playing into this man-made illusion of we must do this. Moral action, on the other hand, is based upon voluntary hierarchies. It is long-term progression, looking past all the illusions. It's education or enlightenment of the masses. It has emulative leaders, as we said before, with no authority. Okay, so we want to follow people, we want to inspire them, we follow people voluntarily, we don't force other people to go along with what we think the world should be. We're educating others instead of saying we need to do elections and all these fancy rituals and processes just so we get to impose our will on the masses. No, it's immoral, right? Let's do away with all the immoral justifications and all the rituals to try to hide it. No taxation, it's just theft. No elections, it's still just slavery and control. We don't need that in our life. Let's just promote morality, what is right at all times, have people use their own mind, use their own conscience because they're given it for a reason and not just throw it away because of some politician and some proclaimed authority. So why do people partake in political action? Does it work? I think history tells us it does not work. And do you require permission to be free? If you require permission, you're not free. And if you give way into the sense of you need permission and you need to do certain things with paperwork and this and that, then you're giving way into that illusion again of you need permission. And if you need permission, you're not free morally or inside your own head mentally. And that is the key to freedom. Freedom is a mental state. Mahatma Gandhi said this. Martin Luther King Jr. said this. Many philosophers said this because, again, your mind creates this reality. So if you believe in pieces of paper having magical powers, that's literally going to come true because humans all made it up and create a whole system around it. So can you vote for freedom, or is freedom learned or exercised? Freedom cannot be voted for. It cannot be written down on a piece of paper. It must be practiced. Individuals have to become self-sustainable and realize the power within themselves, and again, take off that burden that has been on their life. That is moral action, recognizing I can do right. I can get rid of this wrong that's taking hold of me. And so what should you integrate and what should you abolish? If we're abolishing political action, we would stop voting and emphasizing authority. Again, common trend here. And if we're integrating moral action, we would start educating and emphasizing voluntaryism. Voluntaryism is the only alternative to statism. Statism includes democracy, republics, communism, capitalism, whatever. It includes all the isms, the ideologies of controlling other people and telling them how to live their own lives. Voluntaryism is the only one that acknowledges just let people be people. As long as it's all voluntary, you can partake in your capitalist utopia, your communist utopia, your whatever world you want to create for yourself. Awesome. Just don't make other people follow it involuntarily using violence or force, against them, against their will. So, if you want 2 videos that really describe this in detail, The Ugly Truth About Politics, I did a documentary on this. It's by far one of my most favorite videos I've ever produced. And What Nobody in Politics Wants You to Know. That's also for all you folks out there who think voting and paperwork is actually helpful, or why not just do both? Why not promote moral action and vote and do paperwork? No. Voting and paperwork is still political action, and that video describes a lot more about that. Abolitionism by Larkin Rose. So here's a chart that basically compares statism and voluntaryism so you can see the difference. Very big difference because, again, voluntaryism says, hey, let's support individuals. Statism says, let's dominate over individuals. So be sure to, again, pause if you need to. Check that out. And when we talk about moral power, I'm not the only person who would talk about it, because Aidan Ballou, an abolitionist, again, from the 1800s, says moral power always wins and always evolves. He says it's therefore incomparably superior to political power in respect to their general objects, to the numbers that exercise them, to the prominent details of their operation, to their instrumentalities, to priority and independence of action, to their freedom and elasticity, to their disinterestedness, their expense, their influence on their devotees, the service they have rendered mankind, and their very nature and tendency throughout. I recommend reading Aidan Ballou in his text, Moral Power versus Political Power. He goes into detail with that whole common notion, because again, you see how it connects schooling and leadership and law and food and diet, how this all connects to this idea of leave people alone, let them live their lives, and become the person you want to be voluntarily without having to push others down so you can try to get yourself up. It's not going to work. You can try to stand on tiptoes. You're not going to hold yourself long, okay? You depend on others for your existence. You're never going to be free in your own head, okay? You think you can become free by enslaving others? It doesn't work like that, okay? That's why they need to create new systems to try to keep that system up. And guess what? It's going to keep falling and resulting in death because of it. I don't consider the people in power smart. I consider them dumb, because they fall for that just as much as the people who follow them, as above, so below, because they fall into that same notion of involution or entropy. You can see the chart on the bottom here telling us essentially how we evolve as a species overall. We help each other. Truth, complexity, consciousness, goodness, morality, freedom, life, survival, creation, advancement, all these ideas. Beautiful. It creates order. Freedom creates order. Many people will say freedom creates chaos. And if you think like that, you fear freedom, you're never going to obtain it. And freedom allows you, again, to create, to be creative, to express yourself. And without that, you don't have your humanity. So, concluding, abolition and integration. Ignorance is control, disunion with nature. Knowledge is freedom, union with nature, because you want to harmonize your actions to the world you live in. You want to keep learning. Ignorance is control, because you want to shut off your mind. You don't want to harmonize your mindset with the world around you, maybe only the man-made world that you serve. And because you serve that, you aren't really thinking. You just want to give your mind away. You want to be ignorant. You recognize perhaps your ignorance and you just want to succumb to it and see that it may lead you to some unknown paths. And you say, well, I trust it because I've always lived it, and it's safe because I've always lived it. It's not safe because democide is the #1 cause of unnatural death, and that is death by government. So your safety is false safety. And just because you don't see violence right in front of you does not mean it isn't happening. It happens every day. Police brutality and all the many problems. And people will do nothing about it. And it's mostly because people just don't know how to treat it. People will say defund the police and yada yada. And it doesn't make anything better either. What makes it better is recognizing the root cause to this problem is ignorance versus knowledge. Statism versus voluntaryism. So do we abolish ignorance? Do we integrate ignorance? Do we abolish knowledge? Do we integrate knowledge? Well, we integrate to integrate. This is our union. This is us coming together. We build up ourselves to help others. We show by example. We create communities voluntarily. We create those systems that those old barbaric, brutal, violent systems, those governments, don't need to be there anymore because we've integrated ourselves with the natural systems that help humanity. When we abolish to not abolish. This is disunion. Why would we abolish to not abolish? Well, C.S. Lewis is going to tell us what that means. Disunion, however, is the whole point of abolishing. So if we're not abolishing our nature, perhaps it's because we're abolishing a system that's keeping our nature from being our nature. So we're disuniting from the things that aren't supposed to be there and uniting with the things that are supposed to be there. Because our humanity depends upon our humanity. Our integration, our being, our sense of living with each other depends on our ability to do so. Our very ability to speak, to have conversations, to have our own opinions depends on our very ability to speak, to have that in the very first place. And that is being challenged in our world. And so in order to get rid of that, I say, if a common phrase for this, use your nature or lose your nature. And so C.S. Lewis tells us the abolition of man will happen if we do not recognize this very simple truth. He says, what we call man's power over nature turns out to be a power exercised by some men over other men with nature as its instrument. They're manipulating. They're keeping knowledge hidden. They want people to be ignorant so they can keep their control. And then people want to remain ignorant so they can keep their safety, so they can keep their slavery. Their peaceful slavery, as Thomas Jefferson said. C.S. Lewis then tells us we remove the organ and demand the function. We make men without chests and expect of them virtue and enterprise. We expect the world to be harmonious and orderly and everybody to live happily and kind, and then we wonder why we aren't getting that, even though most people say they want that. It's because we remove the organ and demand the function. We give away our humanity. We take away what makes us human. And we wonder why we're becoming detached from nature. We wonder why society is going crazy. It's because we're abolishing ourselves, our very, very being. And so here's a quote about the book, The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis, where he talks in depth about this. Throughout the book, Lewis makes the case that the abandonment of objective moral truths and the embrace of moral relativism, which is the idea that you can just do whatever you want and it doesn't matter, and that morality doesn't matter. You don't need to think about what is right or wrong or what you should do. You should just be ignorant. He says that that embrace of ignorance will ultimately lead to the destruction of civilization and the abolition of man. He argues that we must return to a focus on timeless moral virtues in the natural moral law if we hope to preserve the best of what it means to be human. And this is why the Tao was very, very important, because C.S. Lewis says the Tao, which others may call natural law or traditional morality or the first principles of practical reason or the first platitudes, notice there's many different names for it, is not one among a series of possible systems of value. It is the sole source of all value judgments. It is simply humans aligning to nature. I said this is the standard beyond all standards, and that's why he's saying this. Because if we lose our variability, we won't even be able to talk about politics. We won't even be able to discuss what better systems exist out there. We won't even be able to watch this presentation. We wouldn't be able to live our lives because our nature has been so inhibited, and we just kept abolishing ourselves over time by removing our organs and demanding them to function. It's not how we actually heal. We have to work with what we already have and build ourselves up. Just like the plant that we might want to propagate, meaning we want to take a plant, maybe a stem, like one stem of the plant, and put it into new soil. That soil, it's going to cause a little bit of shock for a bit, but then that soil, because it helps the plant's going to grow back up. Okay, the plant is going to be a new plant because we put it in the right soil. Unless we tug on the plant, unless we make the conditions worse, then it's never going to grow. So it's all about this practice then of intelligence and effortlessness, the path of least resistance, the conscious and the unconscious, the cold cognition for the hot cognition. The Taoists call this Wu Wei for Ziran. So this teaches us that abolition is integration, because as we add in, we get rid of what should not be there. As we are ourselves and we are honest, we fulfill the honest reality. We become and we see more of the honest around us because we embrace what we know to be true. So Wu Wei means effortless. It means embrace. And so Ziran means self-regulating or natural. So if we embrace the natural, we have the Wu Wei and the Ziran, and that is what allows us to fulfill our lives. Because we don't have to try to look for what will fulfill it. We're fulfilling what is already there. We're respecting the natural inherent authority within ourselves. The yin and yang already within the universe. We don't need to try to overshadow our steps, try to stand on tiptoe and try to create a yang-based world. Nor do we need to meditate all day and do nothing and think everything will come about on its own in the yin-based world. But we can recognize both and realizing they're all here for a reason. Everybody's here for a reason. All the moral views are all here for a reason. Everything. And so being able to let go and being able to know what to do, this is an art. This is a practice. And so when we know the whole, we see the bigger picture, then we can best know what to do. This is what allows us to best integrate so we can best abolish. Thank you very much for watching. I hope the practical tips do help you within your own personal life and you can share it with others through your own actions, okay? If you need to, go back and apply it to your life, maybe create some action steps, break it down and journal it, and that can really help further that process. The Liberator 2, the Liberator.us, join that project. There's so much going on there. I mean, gosh, we got articles every single week, a newsletter that you should definitely join, tons of shareable stuff that you can share with other people, strategies that you can use for your own content creation. You can also reach out to me. I'll help you out. There's networking. There's also a radio for truth music. There's events that show there. There's an activism section and activism ideas. There's also interviews where you can share your own personal experiences. And there's also a summit, several summits, where you get to produce content for big events like the conference S.E.E.D 5 METAMORPHOSIS, which is what I'm doing this presentation for. Definitely recommend going to all the other great speakers part of this event. I'm glad to be a part of this event, seedtruth.com. Okay, the End of Slavery Summit was nita.one/summit or endofslavery.org. Nature is the answer. I created a movement to help share a lot of all these ideas, unifying ideas around nature. Nita.one, NITA.ONE. Naturosophy, the philosophy I developed around all of this, nita.one/naturosophy. My books, you'll see the links on the screen for that too, and all the links, taplink.cc/Cory Health. I even released a health book, The Aura Diet. You can feel free to check that out. You can see also my presentation on Taoism if you want a full in-depth understanding of Wu Wei and Ziran and all the many great concepts in an ancient philosophy that nobody basically is talking about in the West, yet is helping so many individuals. It is not a religion, it is a philosophy that can be applied universally and scientifically backed. I think it is gigantically important for this universe. So, gigantic beyond words, because that literally is the Tao. It admits to its own ignorance, and that's what makes it beautiful. It does not say it's the only way. It does not say you must agree with it. That's what makes it so humbling. That's what makes it last throughout all of time. It is known as the oldest, one of the first anarchist texts in history, and yet it's a bunch of people who just love to go fishing, a bunch of old philosophers who really just want to live their own lives and live in simplicity and peace among each other. I mean, they're not people with masks on throwing fire in the streets. They're the individuals that dreamed of a world that could be better, and now we live in an age of mass information where we can bring their ideas en masse. Just as we said, from conscious effort to mass conscious effort, I am an abolitionist. I encourage you to be an abolitionist with me. I'm also an integrative nutrition health coach, but as I integrate, so I also abolish. Thank you very much for watching.